Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on this Japanese black pine. It was grown from a seed, and I'll begin by showing you the history of this tree.
I've got a Japanese black pine seedling here that Michael gave me. Yeah, Michael gave me this black pine seedling. He gave me two of them, but one didn't survive the first winter. But this one did. This is doing really well. So I'm going to put it in a better pot, get some fresh soil in here, and continue to grow it. Yeah, so I can kind of arrange those, kind of flatten radial, and plant it. So I may have to do a little root pruning here. They're a little long, so I'll just remove some of the roots. I think about like that, not too severe. And then I'll arrange them in the pot. So this seedling I think is 3 years old now. And it's never had anything done to it that I know of. So once again, I didn't see any active roots growing on this pine, so probably a good time of year to repot it. So I'll give it a good thorough watering.
The next tree I'll be working on is this Japanese black pine. Last spring I repotted this, I bare rooted it, repotted it, and it has a nice radial root base to it. So it has a lot of potential for the future. So now I'm going to do its first pruning ever on the tree. Here's a close-up look at my Japanese black pine. So I'm going to prune it for the very first time, and I have to envision what the tree will look like in the future. You know, maybe I want the trunk line to be this branch, a slanting style. Maybe I want it to be this as the new leader. Maybe these are sacrifice branches. There's a lot of possibilities. So it all depends on what you envision your tree to look like in the future. If I look at the tree, I've got really strong growth going vertical. I've got 3 super strong buds up top. I've got 2 branches down here that have kind of, the one at the back has a strong bud. This one is kind of a medium size. There is a lot of buds down lower that will develop into branches. Probably. You can see them down here. There's a bud there and one the other side. One thing I'm sure of is that I don't want to grow this tree really small. It's hard to water with these lowest branches here, and I don't want these lower branches that low on the tree. I want the trunk line to come up, and you know, my lowest branch would at least be this high, if not higher. So I think today I'm going to remove these 2 lower branches and develop this trunk line. So here I go. I'm going to cut this one off here, like that, like that. And this one also had about the same, a small to medium, you know, vigor on that bud. So there it is. There's the pine with its first initial pruning. I'm going to begin with the Japanese black pine. Last year I did 2 cuts on it. I cut off these 2 lower bottom branches. It was hard to water with these bottom branches sticking out, and I didn't want branches that low on the trunk line anyway. Since then, I've got 2 new shoots that have developed around that branch I cut off. So last year I had some strong, 3 strong buds up top here. And you can see they grew over the summer and developed into quite large branches. And now at the top of the leader here, I have 1 big central bud and 3 smaller buds surrounding it. Last year, as an April Fool's joke, I wired the 1 needle on this pine into a twisty looking shape. Let's unwire it now and just see if the needle held its shape. I'll be interested. Here's a close-up of that twisty needle that was wired into that flowing S-shaped pattern. So I guess the moral of this is, if you want to wire your needles into curvy shapes, you can do it and they'll hold their shape. I've removed that 1 major thick branch there now, so I'm looking at the remaining branches in this area, and they're kind of a whirl. I've got the 1 out the front, 1 to the left, and 1 to the right, and that's it. So I've got those 3 lower branches and then the thicker one higher up to the left. So I've got to decide, what do I want to keep on this tree?
If I use this branch and this lower one as my, staggering, I think as this tree matures, they're still going to look like they're coming from the same level. There's not enough height variation between this lowest branch and this upper one to make a nice staggered branching on the tree. So I think in this case, I'll just keep one branch in this area as my lowest branch, and all the others will get pruned off. I have to decide which of these 4 branches down in this kind of whorl do I want to keep. As I said before, generally I want to keep my thinnest branches because I don't want these lower branches thickening up and becoming like this branch where it's too thick compared to the trunk. So if I keep my little weak branches down here and maybe prune off my more vigorous one, I'll set the tree up for the next stage of its development. So here I go. This branch is coming off also with a flush cut. Like that. So my next step is to take off these 2 branches. So here I go, removing these 2 branches. Now, there's many strategies you can use on pines to develop the trees. This is just one possible approach. So I'm going to leave a stub for dieback. So here I go, pruning this branch off. Gone. And this branch is coming off also. Gone. These 2 branches will be cleaned up later on as the tree, reroutes all its plumbing. And I'll probably get a ton of new branches in this area here. By removing all these, fairly thick branches in this area, all my energy for the tree is now going to go into growing the top of the tree. So it's going to get very, very tall this year. Eventually, I'll be pruning it back, creating a new leader for taper. I'm going to try and keep it straight. There is a slight movement in it, but I'm not going to worry about that. These cut points are generally quite resiny, so I don't really need to seal them, but I will. I'll seal them with my rubber cement. Down lower on the trunk here are the cuts that I made last year, and I can clean these up now because they've dried up and the plumbing has all been rerouted, so I'll make a flush cut here, like that. On the other side of the trunk here, I have these new little branches, but again, they're too low on the trunk. And if I develop them, I could get, more taper maybe in my trunk, but they're going to leave scars, and I don't want a trunk full of scars on this pine. I want it to be, very beautiful. So that one is going to come off also. Like that. I'll put the black pine away now, and let's get out the pomegranate. We are back to present day time now, January 2024, and it's been a whole year since I've done any work to this tree. The first thing you might notice about this tree is that it's definitely pushing out of the pot. As the root mass grows, it expands and gets more volume, and it raises the tree out of the pot. So it definitely needs repotting this spring. You can even see the roots coming out of the soil here. The trunk on the tree is definitely getting thicker. It's about the size of my finger now, and it's getting some nice bark and character. I removed 2 lower branches here. I removed the stubs last year. I've got some branching happening up higher on the tree here. So in here I have some branches developing. I think there's one out the back, there's 2 out the front, and there's one developing right here at the junction. So I removed these branches last January. I just left stubs, so today I can clean those up, prune the stubs off. And the rest of the tree has just grown. Up top on the tree, you can see how much vigor the tree has. At the top of the tree, I've got a central bud, and I've got 3 really strong buds around it. My side branches here, which have grown in, I've got 3 branches at this whorl here, and they've all got strong buds at the tip. So I think, with repotting in spring into a, well, I don't know if it'll be a larger pot, but it'll certainly get root pruned. And I think the growth will really take off next year. You'll see this trunk probably double, maybe even triple in size if I let it grow. So
I've got to determine, what I want to do with this tree. And my vision for the tree will determine the techniques I use to achieve that style. One of the most common techniques for developing a Japanese black pine is to grow a sacrifice leader like this, which thickens up the roots and the base of the tree. You keep your small branching down low, and then eventually you prune off the entire top of the tree. You get a huge scar here, but that heals over eventually. And you use one of these lower branches as the new leader on the tree, and eventually it blends in nicely, and you get this quite thick trunk tree that's very compact, and you develop your branches then, and you end up with a nice looking bonsai. My goal for this tree is to grow it in a very naturalistic style. I want this Japanese black pine to grow in the style of our native white pines that we have here in Ontario, Canada. They're beautiful, kind of windswept trees. I'll show you some examples of the styling intent that I have for this tree. Because I want to grow this tree in that sort of natural white pine style, my techniques will differ a little. I won't just chop the top off and grow the branches out. It'll be a little different technique to achieve that style. If I was to do nothing to the top of this tree this year, it would just continue to grow and thicken up. And all these needles on this lower trunk might last the summer, and in fall, because the trunk is thickened up so much, they'll start detaching, going yellow, and fall off. So I'll end up with this bare trunk here. So what I want to do is stimulate branches in this section of the tree. To do that, I would need to prune the top of the tree. That would take all the energy that's stored in the tree. It wouldn't go up to these buds up top. They wouldn't just extend out. I would get branching forming on this section of the tree, which is what I want. I want, a selection of branches along the tree that I can develop into the future. There is several approaches I could use to stimulate branching in this section of the tree. As I said before, I could hard prune the entire top off, and that would definitely stimulate branching in this section of the tree. These needles are really healthy. There's dormant buds at the base of each needle, so by cutting that top off, it would definitely stimulate a lot of branching in this section. I could do it a less severe approach. I could just prune off these branches at the top of the tree and leave one leader. Removing these branches would also stimulate branching in this section, and I would have the leader to continue to grow up tall and thicken the whole tree up. I do want some taper in this trunk, but I don't want massive taper. I'm not after, that typical Japanese black pine bonsai image where you have a highly tapered trunk and then sort of a triangular or rounded crown on it. I want this to be more of a natural looking tree. So I've got to decide, do I prune the entire top off or maybe just some branches? While I'm making that decision on the top of the tree, I'm going to clean up these stubs here from last year where I pruned off these branches. So I will come in and try and make a nice flush cut here. So here I go, branch stub number 1. That's removed. And then over here, my second branch stub. Come in right here, and here I go.
there's stub number 2 removed. I've been thinking a lot about which strategy I should use on this tree, whether I should cut the whole top off or just some of the branches. And I'm in no hurry to develop this trunk into a massive trunk quickly. So I think I'm going to be dramatic and cut the tree off about here. That'll definitely get branching in this area, and then I can develop a new branch as a leader and continue growing the tree. What I would hate to happen is if I just remove these 3 branches from the top and left my leader, is that I wouldn't get branching in the right areas on this trunk line. I might get branches popping out up top, but nothing in this section. So by hard pruning it back, I'm definitely going to get budding in this section where I want the branches. So I think that's my final decision, is I'm going to cut the top of the tree off. A pretty dramatic move, I think. All right, big cut coming up. Now, where do I prune it? I'm thinking somewhere about here. I've got lots of needles here, lots of places for branches to come out. So here I go. I'm coming in with the ratcheting pruners. Big cut coming up. Here I go. Just like that. Here is a look at my tree now. I think that's looking good. If I get branches up here, I'll be very happy. I'm going to seal up my cuts with rubber cement. The rubber cement worked really good on the previous cuts in the past, so I will keep using it. All right, so a big drop on the apex here. And I'll seal up where I cut these branches off. There's one, and the second one over here. I'm hoping the rubber cement stops bleeding in spring. If I didn't seal this, I think in spring it would be leaking sap out quite a bit. So hopefully, you know, this wound will kind of heal a bit before spring and I won't get a lot of sap leakage. I'll rotate the pine around now so you can see it from all angles. There's the right hand side, the back. Oh, there's some old needles that need to come out there, and the right hand side, and back to a possible front. My next operation for this tree will come in spring, where I'll be root pruning and repotting it. I don't know if I'll be using the same pot or a larger pot. It'll all depend on what the root system looks like. I think it'll be interesting this spring to see how the branches develop on this tree. I'll see if I use the right technique or not. Time will tell. So that is all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.